In the quiet suburb of Genera, nestled on the outskirts of Athens, a tragic story unraveled in the early hours of May 11th, 2021, that would grip the world with horror. It began as the tale of a young girl, Caroline Crouch, who, like many teenagers, dreamed of a fairy tale romance. Born on July 12, 2001 in Athens, Caroline was the daughter of David Crouch, a retired engineer, and Susan Della Costa at the age of 8. Caroline moved with her family to the picturesque island of Alanos. The island, with its serene beaches and coastal beauty, became her playground and the backdrop of her early years. Caroline thrived in this environment, developing a deep passion for the sea, scuba diving, and swimming. But it was during a Good Friday parade in 2017, at the tender age of 15, that Caroline's life would change forever. She met Haralambos Anagnos Stus, known as Babis, a 27-year-old helicopter pilot. Babis, with his charismatic presence and successful career, quickly won over the young girl's heart. Their love blossomed, and despite the significant age difference, Caroline and Babis became inseparable. 3 years later, on July 15, 2019, they eloped and married in a picturesque ceremony in Portugal. To the outside world, they seemed like the perfect couple, a beautiful young woman and her dashing pilot husband, ready to embark on a life filled with love and adventure. Their life together seemed idyllic. The couple settled into a 2-story maisonette in Genera, a peaceful neighborhood, ideal for raising a family. Soon their joy was amplified by the arrival of their daughter, who was born in June 2020. Caroline embraced motherhood with the same enthusiasm she had for the sea, while Babis continued his work as a commercial helicopter pilot. They dreamed of building a home together and had recently purchased a plot of land intending to construct their dream house. Caroline's parents had generously gifted her 50,000 euros, and the couple had saved another 10,000 euros, which they kept hidden in their house, part of the cash stashing culture that many Greeks adhered to in the wake of the country's financial instability. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, cracks were beginning to show. The pressures of marriage, parenthood, and their age difference began to strain the relationship. Caroline, who had once been captivated by Bobby's charm, found herself increasingly isolated and unhappy. Yet these tensions were known only to those closest to her, while the public continued to see them as the embodiment of a modern fairy tale. Everything changed in the early hours of May 11th, 2021, at around 4:30 a.m. Babis was awakened by the sound of intruders breaking into their home. The peaceful suburban night was shattered by the chaos that ensued. 3 men, their faces concealed by hoods, burst into the bedroom where Babis, Caroline, and their infant daughter were asleep. The men were armed, their voices thick with Greek and Albanian accents, and they wasted no time in overpowering Babis. They tied him up, blindfolded him with duct tape, and left him helpless. As they turned their attention to Caroline, the men demanded money, their voices cold and threatening. Caroline, terrified and disoriented, tried to protect her daughter, who had been awakened by the commotion and was crying in her crib. Babis, in a desperate attempt to save his family, revealed the location of the cash they had hidden in the house. The intruders found the money in an unconventional hiding spot, a Monopoly game box. But even after taking the cash, the men were not satisfied. They continued to ransack the house, searching for more valuables, jewelry, electronics, anything of worth. They took it all. The ordeal was far from over. The intruders, unsatisfied with their call, grew increasingly aggressive. Caroline and Babis, now bound and terrified, pleaded for their lives and the life of their daughter. But their pleas fell on deaf ears. The men, their faces masked but their brutality evident, pressed a gun to the head of the infant, pushing Caroline to the brink of hysteria. Babis, though blindfolded, fought against his restraints, his desperation mounting with each passing second as Babis struggled. The intruders turned their attention back to Caroline. What happened next was nothing short of a nightmare. Caroline was brutally attacked, smothered with a pillow as she fought for her life. The attack was not quick. For 6 agonizing minutes, Caroline resisted, her body covered in bruises, her lips and tongue showing signs of a struggle. But the men were relentless. They pressed on until her life was extinguished. Babis, his strength waning, slipped in and out of consciousness. The intruders, believing they had left no witnesses, finally led the scene, leaving behind a house in ruins and a family destroyed. The only sound was the desperate cries of his infant daughter, who was still beside her mother's lifeless body, trying in vain to wake her up with his hands and feet still bound. Bobby somehow managed to reach his phone. Using his nose, he dialed emergency services. His voice, muffled by the duct tape around his mouth, was filled with panic as he pleaded for help. The operator could barely understand him, but Babis managed to convey that intruders had broken in and that his wife was in grave danger. First responders arrived at the scene around 6 a.m., almost an hour and a half after the intruders had first entered the house. What they found inside was nothing short of horrific. The house had been completely ransacked. Drawers were pulled out, their contents strewn across the floor. The Monopoly box, once a symbol of family fun, now lay open and empty. A security camera torn from its place on the wall was lying on the couch, its memory card missing. But the most chilling discovery was the family's husky puppy, Roxy, who had been strangled with her own leash and left hanging from the staircase. Babis was found on the floor, his mouth and eyes still covered in duct tape, his hands and feet tied behind his back. On the bed lay Caroline, her body pale and lifeless, face down on the mattress. Beside her, their infant daughter was crying, her small hands trying to rouse her mother, unaware that she was already gone. Caroline was pronounced dead at the scene. The sight of her lifeless body, bruised and battered, left the first responders in shock. Babis, once freed from his restraints, appeared to be in visible shock as well. He collapsed in grief when he saw his wife's body, the weight of the tragedy overwhelming him. The police immediately began their investigation. Based on Bobby's account, they concluded that 4 men were involved in the crime, 3 who had entered the house and a 4th who kept watch outside. The intruders, they believed, had approached the house via a dirt road that led to the rear entrance. When they failed to break in through the back door, they had removed the security pins from a basement window and gained entry that way. Inside, they had killed the family dog, ransacked the house, and then murdered Caroline before making their escape. But as the investigation progressed, inconsistencies began to emerge. The first responders noted that despite the chaos in the house, there was a curious lack of physical evidence. The only item left behind by the intruders was a single hood, which Bobs claimed had fallen off during the struggle. Based on Bobby's description, a sketch was created of one of the intruders. An overweight, dark-skinned man with a tall stature. Babis also mentioned that the intruders had used 2 firearms, a black pistol and a silver Colt. Despite these details, the police found at a loss. The intruders had taken 10,000 euros in cash and jewelry worth another 20,000, but the motive behind Caroline's murder remained unclear. If the goal was theft, why had they killed Caroline after obtaining the money? Speculation ran rampant. Some suggested that the intruders were high on drugs and had lost control. Others believed that Caroline may have known the intruders or that her resistance during the robbery had provoked them into silencing her. As investigators delved deeper into the case, they began to question the timeline provided by Babis. Forensic analysis of the couple's phones and Caroline's smartwatch revealed discrepancies that cast doubt on his version of events. The data indicated that the memory card from the security camera had been removed around 1:20 a.m., hours before Babis claimed the intrusion occurred. Furthermore, Caroline's smartwatch showed no signs of a struggle at 4:30 a.m., the time Bobby said the attack took place. In fact, the data suggested that Babis had been moving around the house during the time he claimed to be tied up. These findings led the police to a startling conclusion. Caroline's murder may not have been the result of a home invasion at all. Instead, the evidence pointed to a much darker possibility that Babis himself was involved in his wife's death. Under mounting pressure, the police decided to confront Babis with the evidence. On June 17, 2021, just a little over a month after Caroline's murder, Babis was summoned to the police station As he sat in the interrogation room, he was presented with the forensic data that contradicted his story. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, Babis broke down and confessed to the crime. In his confession, Babis revealed the shocking truth behind Caroline's death. The night before the murder, the couple had argued over their daughter, Caroline, who had been growing increasingly unhappy in the marriage, had threatened to leave Babis and take their daughter with her. In a fit of rage, Babis smothered Caroline with a pillow, holding it over her face until she stopped breathing. He then spent the next several hours staging the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong. He removed the memory card from the security camera, killed the family dog, and ransacked the house to create the appearance of a home invasion. Finally, he tied himself up and called the police, hoping to divert suspicion away from himself. The revelation sent shockwaves through Greece and beyond. The man who had once been portrayed as a grieving husband and father was now exposed as a cold-blooded killer. Bobby's carefully crafted story of a tragic home invasion had unraveled, revealing a tale of domestic violence, manipulation, and murder. Caroline Crouch's death became a symbol of the darker side of domestic relationships, where love can turn into control and violence. The media, which had initially covered the story as a tragic robbery, now turned its focus on the broader issues of domestic abuse and the dangers that can lurk behind closed doors. Caroline's friends and family, who had once celebrated her marriage to Babis, were left to grapple with the devastating truth that the man they had welcomed into their lives had betrayed them in the most horrific way possible. Bobby was arrested and charged with the murder of Caroline Crouch. During his trial, he attempted to portray the murder as a crime of passion, claiming that he had acted in the heat of the moment. However, the premeditated nature of the crime and the lengths he went to cover it up left little doubt about his true intentions. The court found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 16 years. Caroline Crouch's tragic story is a chilling reminder of how appearances can be deceiving. What seemed like a perfect marriage was in reality a relationship marked by control, manipulation, and ultimately murder. Her death serves as a somber warning of the dangers of domestic violence and the importance of recognizing the signs before it's too late.